Good morning students, I glad you welcome all in this interesting section. Today we have to learn 11th standard English, Unit 1, Supplementary Reader. After 20 years. After 20 years written by O. Henry. This supplementary reader focuses on the reunion of two old friends, Jimmy and Bob. Through their brief encounter, the two explore the theme of friendship, loyalty, and trust. The 20 years ending sequence are very interesting. So watch the video carefully until the end. Don't skip the video, students.
Well. You all have friends, because there is no one in the world without a friend. We all feel friends are a source of comfort, and sometimes we rely on our friends more than the family members. I would like to ask you a question. What is the greatest ship of all the ships you have come across? You may say it is the friendship, because this is the generation that gives much importance to friendship. And here today we are going to learn a lesson. It is from the first unit, Supplementary Reader, After 20 Years, written by O. Henry. It's a story of two friends. The story was written by O. Henry, who is a popular American short story writer. His original name is William Sidney Porter. He started to write short stories for the New York World periodically. Every Sunday, you will get a short story written by O. Henry published in that magazine. He got wide publication. So he started to write for years. He has written nearly more than 300 short stories. And his stories are known for the unexpected twist in the end. And he has romanticized the life of ordinary people in New York. His stories have an effect on the daily routine and the coincidence of characters in life. He had lived only for 40 years, but during this short span of time, he has become very popular by his short stories. And a few of his popular stories are The Last Leaf, that deals with the caring love of two friends; The Gift of the Magi, a genuine love between a young couple; The Cop and the Anthem, it's a story of a culprit who wanted to get arrested but not. So there are many stories we could list out. All his stories are almost popular. Here the plot of our story, After 20 Years. In this story, O. Henry delineates, he gives a vivid description in words, the duty consciousness of a true policeman. It's a conflict between his love for his friend and his professional loyalty. He is torn between these two aspects, and we will see what happens at the end. I can ask a question. What do you expect your close friends to do for you? We expect from them to guide us at the time of need, love us, care for us, encourage us, support us, share with us, help us, and advise us. And we could list out many more, many ways we are feeling that friends are good companions in our life to do almost everything in our life. That is why the UNO has allotted a day as International Day of Friendship. When is it? It is celebrated worldwide on the 30th July of every year. How do we celebrate? Celebrations we like the most. And when it is for friends, there is no need for explaining it. There is no boundary for expressing our happiness. We greet one another on the day. We exchange gifts with one another. We are visiting friends during the time. We have a get-together, and at the present context, we take group photos. Why? To upload it in the social media and share with the world our happiness and joy, our friendship. Now let us come to our lesson after 20 years. The main characters in this story are G.B. Wells is a policeman, Bob the culprit. At the final stage, there comes another character for a period of short time, the officer in plain clothes. The story begins with the policeman on his duty on the beat. He is doing his duty, walking around the street, trying his club, moving it with a lot of twirling movements, in intrigue ways, in strange ways. He was walking along the avenue. He was impressive, found to be impressive in his duty. And we could say his impressiveness was habitual, not a show. He was a real, honest, true policeman. The time was barely 10 o'clock at night. The weather was chill. There were gusts of wind. The cool climate has almost de-peopled the streets. You could rarely find people here and there, and they were also moving very fast to their shelter. With this stalwart form, a very physically strong form, and slight swagger, a gentle and confident walk, he looked like a guardian of peace. He was a policeman. He was there on his duty to maintain peace in the area of his duty. It was dark at night everywhere because most of the big shops were closed. Only the lights from the cigar store or an all-night lunch counter were seen. He was trying doors with his club and walking along the avenue. By the time, all of a sudden, about a midway of a certain block, this policeman suddenly slowed his walk. Why? Had he noticed anything? Yes, in the doorway of a darkened hardware store, a man was found leaning with an unlighted cigar in his mouth. And it was the duty of the policeman to inquire. When the policeman walked up to him, the man standing in darkness started to speak to him quickly and voluntarily. And that man said he was waiting for his friend. Why? Because it was an appointment made 20 years ago at this place, where there used to be a restaurant called Big Joe Brady's Restaurant. And this information looked funny to the policeman. What? An agreement made before 20 years, and the friend has come to meet him after 20 years. It was a funny thought he made. Immediately after that, the policeman said, yes, there was a restaurant in this place until 5 years ago. Later it was demolished. Now there is a store built in that place. When they were talking to each other, the man in the doorway, he struck a match to light his cigar. In that light, the policeman, as a policeman, he scanned the features of that man in darkness. The light showed a pale, square-jawed face with keen eyes and a little white scar near his right eyebrow. The short period of time, he had noticed all the features of that man who was standing near the stove. And in that light, there was a shining particle that he looked at, that it was a scarf pin of that man with a large diamond in it. Now that man in darkness started to tell his story, what happened in the past. It's a flashback. And he said 20 years back, the same night, he and his friend Jimmy Wells, he dined at a Big Joe Brady's restaurant, and Jimmy Wells was his best friend in the world because he was the finest chap in the world. They both were raised in New York like brothers. By that time, 20 years back, that man was 18 and Jimmy was 20. Now what would be their age? Now this man in darkness would be 38 and Jimmy must be 40. And he continued the story. As per their agreement, the next morning that man started for the west, but Jimmy stuck himself to New York. For Jimmy Wells, New York was everything that he could find a comfortable life. And the agreement was made to meet after 20 years, the same place, same time, the same date. Whatever the conditions they are in, whatever the distance they may live in, they had to come there to follow the agreement and to meet after 20 years. Right, it was an interesting story for the policeman. Then he asked if they had corresponded to each other after that, and he inquired about all their contact modes. But the man said, in a year or two, they were corresponding to each other, then they lost the track because that man who was standing in darkness said that he was busy in the west. Then the policeman was very sure that Jimmy would come if he were alive. And the man said, he has come 1,000 miles to be there. So he was very sure that Jimmy would come to meet him. The time was 3 minutes to 10. It was exactly 10 o'clock when they parted 20 years back. And this policeman, who is now no one but Jimmy, he asked about his life in the West. The man said he had to compete with these sharp-minded people in the West. And unlike a safe life and situation in New York, the West, he said, would put anyone on razor edge. Razor edge, so anyone who wants to live there has to struggle in critical situations, tough situations. The policeman twisted his club and took steps to move. He wished that his friend would come. Meantime, he wanted to check the time. This man in darkness, by the time the policeman noticed, there were diamonds studded on the lid of his watch. So he thought he must be a rich man. Then the policeman wished that his friend would come and he wanted to move. Then the man said that he would wait for his friend for another 30 minutes. If Jimmy were alive, he was sure that he would definitely come to meet his friend. Now the policeman left the place. The man in darkness could not identify that the policeman was Jimmy. The climate was very chill. The people were hurrying to their shelter. The man who had come 1,000 miles stood there smoking his cigar and waiting for his friend. After 20 minutes, another man hurried across from the opposite side. The man in darkness looked very keenly. So he believed that the coming man must be Jimmy. So when that man came near this Bob, he is the man in darkness, the another friend. He inquired very eagerly, "Is you that Bob?" Then immediately he responded, "Is that you, Jimmy Wells?" Yes, both of them identified that they were friends, so there were emotional inquiries. They grasped their hands, they almost hugged each other, they were speechless for some time. And they started to talk, they missed the old restaurant, they wished that they could have a dinner now if it were there. Bob wondered on looking at Jimmy that he had grown 2 or 3 inches in these 2 years. Then the man who came now, he was in an overcoat. They could move to a common place, he knew, to sit and chat for some time. So the two friends, they started at the street, arm in arm. Now after 20 years they have met, so there is no other way than expressing their love and care. They were keeping their arms linked together, arm in arm. They started to walk in the street. The man from the west was with his egotism. Egotism is boasting nature, that he was the domineering character, and he was outlining the history of his career, that he had to struggle a lot in the West and he had earned a lot, whereas New York would not allow anyone to earn a lot of money. The other one, Jimmy Wells, was listening to the stories of his friend Bob with a lot of interest. When they were walking along the street, there was a drugstore in that corner. At that corner, near the store, there were brilliant lights. So when they come to that area where it is bright, they wanted to look at each other. They turned towards and looked at each other's face. The man from the west stopped suddenly because he was shocked to see the another man and released his arm. Why? Because he, in that light, identified that the other man was not Jimmy Wells. Why? How did he find out? Because they were friends from the childhood. He could remember all his features. Jimmy had a Roman nose, but now this man has a pug. There are different types of noses. We may call in our situation long nose, flat nose, small nose, but there are different names and descriptions. They are called Greek nose, stand-up nose, celestial nose, butter nose, even Newborn nose. Lot of noses are classified, and here he could identify with his nose that the man who had come to meet him, saying that he was Jimmy Wells, was not Jimmy Wells because his nose was completely changed. There's a vast difference between Roman nose and pug nose. Roman nose, a long and a big sized one. Pug nose is like almost like a pug. So the other tall man told, now he has come to his position. He, with an authoritative, told that he had come to arrest Silky Bob, the criminal wanted in Chicago. He handed over a note to him from Patrolman Wells. Actually, this Bob was a criminal, and an advertisement was posted in the newspaper announcing gift for his capture. Now, the man who had come was a policeman in plain clothes, and given him a letter. He got it casually, unfolded it, but he started to tremble as he read the letter. What was written there? Bob, I was at the appointed time when you struck the match to light your cigar. I saw it was the face wanted in Chicago. Somehow, I couldn't do it myself. So I went around and got a plainclothes man to do the job. It's a letter from Jimmy. He was shocked. It was a thrill. Policeman who had come at the beginning was the real Jimmy Wells. He had come to meet his friend. Bob had already come to that place. When this policeman met him and he noted his features, came to know that his friend was a criminal. So his friendship blocked him to arrest him. That is why he went silently back and sent another man in plain clothes to arrest him. He was loyal to his friendship, but at the same time more loyal to his duty. He was very much duty conscious. So, my dear friends, the time and situation may change anyone from good to bad. We have to be very careful. And at any time of crisis, whatever the situation we come across, we should be honest and loyal to our duty and execute that duty without any fear. I would like to ask a question. What would you do if you were Jimmy Wells? I could get your mind voice that you also would behave in the way Jimmy Wells behaved. You are all good students. Now let us sum up the story. It's a story of two friends who decide to part ways to make their fortunes. They return to keep an appointment they had made 20 years before. Bob has traveled 1,000 miles to meet his friend Jimmy Wells. Their proposed meeting point was Big Joe Brady's restaurant. Now it's gone. In the dark, Bob lights a cigar. Jimmy Wells notices the features of Bob and he understood that he was a criminal wanted by Chicago police and he could not, as a friend, arrest himself. The policeman leaves, assuring Bob that his friend would come. After 20 minutes, a man in an overcoat comes, calling out his name. The lights of the drugstore reveal that the man was not Jimmy Wells. The man hands a note and arrests Bob. The note is from Patrolman Wells, who met him at the beginning. Now we'll try to recapitulate what we have learned. I'll ask a few questions. You would be definitely able to answer the questions. Who are the two friends? Bob and Jimmy Wells. What was their appointment? Their appointment was to meet after 20 years. What was the venue of appointment? It was Big Joe Brady's restaurant. Where did Bob move to? Bob moved to the west. Who was the policeman? Jimmy Wells was the policeman. How did Jimmy identify Bob as the criminal? On seeing the features of Bob when he lit the cigar. Why didn't he arrest Bob? His friendship made him reluctant to do the job by himself. And how did he finally arrest him? He got another policeman in plain clothes to arrest him. So, dear friends, try to have good friends, be a good friend and be a good citizen to the society. Bye for now. We'll meet again, but not after 20 years. Now, friends, now we have understood the story. Now, let us analytically analyze the character sketch of the main characters. The first one, Jimmy Wells. Jimmy Wells, from the beginning, a man who wanted to be honest, sincere, and very active. So he wanted to stay in New York and he got a job in the government department, and even at the beginning it was said his activities were impressive because it was habitual, not a show. And even at the end we come to understand he was ready to arrest when he came to know that his friend was a criminal. He did not bother about his friendship by the time. He wanted to be loyal to his duty. So he arrested. Maybe he followed a different way of arresting him. Bob, in another way, he preferred to go to the west to earn a lot, and for which he had selected ways that were not applicable or suitable to a common man. He was ready to do any kind of job to earn money. And another information given about him is that he was taking part in robberies, especially with the old people and ladies, and he earned a lot. And even now he was boasting about his profession. The plainclothes man, he came at the last. He was also a policeman. He obeyed the order of or a request of Jimmy Wells, and he was bold enough to arrest a culprit as per the order given by Jimmy Wells. So whatever the situation may be, we have to be sincere and honest in everything what we do. My dear friends, thank you for listening to the video lessons. Now don't stop with this alone. You take the book, keeping in mind the story you have listened to, the story you had viewed on the TV. Now read the supplementary reader thoroughly, and you will try to understand better the story. Then after that, you try to answer the small questions given after the lesson. On page number 30, you find a few exercises. Even if when you read the supplementary reader, if you cannot understand any difficult terms, you can refer to the glossary, and meanings are given in a very simple and clear way. You can understand the story. Try to answer the questions. And the questions are very simple, one of which is to say true or false. And the first question begins that the policeman stopped on hearing the barking of dogs. It is not so, it is false, because he stopped when he noticed a man leaning over the doorway of a store in the dark. In that way, you can check with the answers. You try to follow whether the statement is true or false. Then once you are able to give the correct answers, you will have the satisfaction that you have learned. We will also be happy. And there are certain phrases given in that, for which even on the video lesson, the meanings were given at the bottom. Arm in arm, moving close to each other, keeping the arms in other's arm, on the beat. That shows the policeman was on the duty. In that way, for that terms also, if you can, idiomatic expressions, if you can understand the meanings, you will easily understand the story. Try to read, try to understand, try to answer all the questions. That it is a complete job you have done. Success will be yours. Be a good friend and be a good citizen to the society.
Students, I hope you are all understanding the supplementary very well. Study the book back question answers in your English textbook and write the question answer in your English classwork note and send it in the WhatsApp group. Thank you, students.